This one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from AJ, formerly from Mississippi, if that moves the needle for Brian. Okay, thank you, AJ.
I thought AJ was from Gainesville, Georgia.
Here's his question. I have a question about the NWA title. Was it a boon to a territory to say one of their own was the NWA champion, despite the fact that the champ wouldn't be around as much in his own territory? Did promoters sit around in a room for hours until one brave soul threw himself on the metaphorical grenade and let his top star work for the other territories? I see the drawbacks of having your star as the NWA champion, but could you tell me a little bit more about the benefits?
Jesus Christ. Every promoter wanted their top guy to be the NWA champion. That's why there was always the vote every year at the convention, and why that there was politicking going on to get, if Eddie Graham wanted Jack Briscoe, well, he had to get Fritz, and he had to get Bob Geigel, and he had to get Jimmy Crockett, and enough people on board with that so that, so that it would become so. But no, I don't think any promoter necessarily ever lobbied for his guy not to be world champion, because if it was his top guy and he found out, if the wrestler found out the promoter had blocked him from being the NWA world champion, the most sought after job in the wrestling business at that time, chances are that would have screwed that up. And if he was a big enough star that people were contemplating him to be the champion, then he could quit working for one guy and go work for somebody else pretty easily. Generally, it was you couldn't get the promoter to shut up about pitching their fucking guy to be champion. And that was why that only the people like Eddie Graham or Sam Muchnick, or the top 3 or 4 guys in the business, promoters in the business, really had enough pull to get some of the other promoters to go along with them. Poor Jerry Jarrett was, on the soapbox in the wilderness about giving Lawler the title, but it would have been fantastic for his territory if the local promoter can say, well, Dusty Rhodes in Atlanta, or Jack Briscoe in Florida, or Jerry Lawler in Memphis, or Kevin Von Erich in Dallas, or fucking Bulldog Bob Brown in Kansas City, or pick the fucking territory. If they could say so-and-so has just won the World Heavyweight Championship, we won't see him as often as we used to because he's going to be all over the country, but that just goes to show that the wrestlers here in this part of the country are the toughest anywhere. Then they go right along doing their business. But when that guy's finished with that belt, like Harley Race did when he went back to Kansas City, now a little promotion like Kansas City has a full-time guy that was a former world heavyweight champion. Just because Harley's from Kansas City and owned part of the company, even though it's a little bitty territory, one of the biggest names in wrestling is appearing there regularly. It helps. So no, the only time I can think of, and Brian helped me, that a promoter did not want his guy to be the world champion was the whole debacle with Carpentier. And who was it who was it the promoter in Montreal or Boston, one of the other, that
Eddie Quinn
said Eddie Quinn. He ran both at one period of time or another, but this was when he was running Montreal. Carpentier was his biggest draw. They did the deal where they did a disputed decision with Lou Thez, so that the theory was Thez was going to take an international tour. Carpentier and Thez would both be title claimants, and then they'd, reunite it after some period of time. But Quinn went back on it because he didn't want to lose Carpentier. And then Carpentier found out about it and ended up getting sideways with Quinn, didn't he?
I think so. And of course, Carpentier's title claim would end up being recognized and leading into the formation of the WWA in Los Angeles. And then that title would get split off, although in Los Angeles they had no idea, to becoming Dick the Bruiser's WWA, because he won the WWA World title there. So it is an interesting history if you track the title. If you track the claim of Carpentier, there's a whole different timeline of the NWA that's really interesting.
Well, and Carpentier was that title switch and etc. was figured into the original AWA storyline for the AWA. Carpentier created, directly or indirectly, about 4 or 5 different world champions just off of beating Thez in a disputed decision once and the angle in the NWA that didn't go through.
See, I always believed that Carpentier should be recognized as an official NWA champion because he was. He was on the front cover of magazines and programs. They had all sorts of flyers and stuff going out to shows announcing him as the world champion, claiming he was the guy who beat the belt. Even in the early 60s, they were still referring to him in Chicago as a former world champion.
Yeah. It took with a lot of people. And at a time when the fans especially and everybody in the business paid attention to the world champion because there was only one major one at the time that, he got it. And then it all fell apart for a variety of behind-the-scenes reasons.
Jim, our next question sent to Corny Drive.
But here's one more. I wonder if they had really put the belt on him, who would Carpentier, as we've heard, he was one of the most egotistical, self-centered type of people that didn't want to do jobs and always wanted to be about him. Besides Thez, who could they have ever gotten to find him to drop it to? Thez could have taken it, but that would have been interesting. Maybe they would have created a monster.
Dick Beyer. Again, he went to Los Angeles. He went to L.A., so I consider that's the route I would look, Dick Beyer. And you weren't going to fuck around too much in L.A. They found that out after Bearcat Wright fucked with Blassie, and then he realized he was going to run into the wall of Gene LaBelle, and he took off.
Well, with Dick Beyer, they wouldn't have needed Gene LaBelle.
Right, exactly.
Dick could have done it just fine.